Hello everybody, this is a video about patterns. I am your magical host, Mr. Shirley, the Bearded Wonder. Now I would like you to make some notes as you're going through this video. If you have your math notebook, if you brought that home from school, please put it there. If you didn't, please just put it on a lined piece of paper, keep it together with your other notes, and that will work just fine for now. Our title is just Patterns Introduction, and please also put a date on there, make it look nice and pretty. Okay, and our learning goal, which you don't need to write down, is just to consider some terminology related to patterns and some different ways of representing or writing patterns. All right, you don't need to write this down, but I would like you to take a moment, pause the video, and try and find the next three terms that are in each of these patterns. Okay, so pause and find some terms. Go. Okay, I'll assume you did that, and we'll just sort of quickly take a look at these just to sort of refresh your memory about patterns a little bit. So the first one's fairly straightforward. You're just adding 6 each time, so you should have had these as the next 3. The second one's also fairly straightforward. It's just multiplying by 3 each time. Okay, so the numbers do get somewhat large, but just multiplying by 3, not too bad. The third one is a little bit trickier. Hopefully you got it, but it's adding a little bit more each time. So the first step, it's adding 1, then adding 2, then adding 3, then adding 4. Okay, you get the idea. Add 5, add 6, add 7. The last one is a very cool sequence called the Fibonacci Sequence. And this actually presents itself in nature in a number of ways, and we'll talk about that next week. Like I said, very cool. But for this pattern, you get the next number by adding up the 2 numbers that come before it. Okay, so 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 plus 2 equals 3, 2 plus 3 equals 5, 3 plus 5 equals 8, and so on. So 5 plus 8 equals 13, 8 plus 13 equals 21, and so on. Hands up if you knew the Fibonacci sequence. Okay. I'm sure a couple of you put your hands up and have no idea what it is. You just like raising your hand. Okay, so on we go with the rest of our note. I would like you to write down this slide and really most of the rest of it. But just please make note of the terms series and sequence. Sometimes they'll be used in place of the word pattern. I'll do it as well. Technically, they don't mean the same thing, as you'll discover in later years of math, but for grade 7 math, series, sequence, and pattern mean relatively the same thing, so any of them will work. All right, so patterns can be represented in several different ways. Yes, write this down. So there's a pattern rule, which is basically English. Okay, and we'll do some examples of these on the next slide. But a pattern rule is just English written out what your pattern does. A table of values is just a little chart that lists all the values in your pattern. You know what a graph is, you're just graphing your pattern. And algebra we will look at in a later lesson, but you can also express your pattern using algebra. Okay, and please remember, if you find that I'm going too quickly, remember you're watching a video, so you can pause it and back it up. And, you know, if you just can't hear enough of my voice, you could always watch it 5 or 6 times if you really just want to, you know, bask in the awesomeness of these math videos. Now, what we'll do is take a fairly straightforward series up at the top there and just kind of do some examples of it, so it's pretty clear what each of them mean. So hopefully, looking at that, you've noticed that it goes up by 3 each time. So the pattern rule is just expressing that in English. Okay, so the pattern rule, a simple pattern rule here is to begin at 1 and add 3 for each new term. Okay, now I just want to highlight something very specific. Any pattern rule, you can write it in a few different possible ways. It does not have to match exactly with what I would do, but it does need to have 2 specific things in that rule, okay? You need to describe what the first number is, what your pattern begins at. That might be bad grammar, but where your pattern begins, and then you add 3 for each new term. So you're describing where it starts and how it's going up or down, as the case may be. Okay, so those 2 things must be there in any pattern rule. Otherwise, there's some leeway about how you describe it. All right, Excuse me. Now, a table of values is just a very simple chart that outlines the numbers that are in your pattern. Okay, the term numbers here literally just mean, so term 1, it means the first term, second term, third term, fourth term, and so on. These just mean the position in the pattern. Okay, not the actual value of the number. And then in the number column here, and sometimes you'll see the word value here instead of the word number, it means the same thing, are just the actual numbers that were in those positions. Okay, so the first number in the pattern is the number 1, the second number is the number 4, the third number in the pattern is 7, the fourth number is 10, and apparently I didn't decide to write the fifth number, so poor number 13 gets left out. But you get the idea. You can make it as big as you need it to be. Now with the graph, I didn't include a specific graph here. I will on the next slide for a different example, but I just want to, we did graphing already this I guess it was last year, but in October, November, we did a bunch of graphing, and you guys are all very familiar with that. So I don't feel the need to go too much into the graphing. You can do it. We'll practice it a bit. There you go. But the term values here should be on the horizontal. Okay, so first term, second term, third term will be on the horizontal part of your graph. And then the y value, or vertical, and I'm using x and y here because they'll come up later in the year as well in some other units, is the number. So up on your vertical axis are your numbers here. So 1, 4, 7, 10 would go up and down. Okay, on we go. The last example I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take a look at the graph and make a pattern rule for it. So I'd like you to pause the graph, or pause the video for a moment, and make a simple pattern rule for that graph that you see right there, for that pattern that's on the graph represented by the blue dots. Okay, so pause the video if you didn't do that. Give it a try. Okay, I'll assume you did that. Just going to point out a couple of things quickly. So the bottom are so first term, second term, third term, fourth term, and so on. On the vertical axis here are the values that we're looking at. Whoa, whoops. Let's leave that where it was. So again, remember, for any good pattern rule, you're wanting to say where it starts and how it's going up each time. Okay, so hopefully you got that it begins at 10. Okay, so the first term is 10, and it's increasing by 5 each time. Okay, so 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. Okay, so hopefully you got that one. Please try out the work that I've included in Google Classroom to go with this, and let me know if you have any questions by email or during our Zoom meetings or during the office hours, which I'll talk lots about during our Zoom meetings. Thank you very much for watching, and have a super day.